Hello, how's it going? I'm Kamran Zareh, teacher here at Landrum Middle School, the new Landrum Middle School in Spring Branch ISD, which is located in Houston, Texas. What I'm going to do today is I'm going to demonstrate and explain how to use the combination disc and belt sander. I'm also going to show you how to use the oscillating spindle sander, as well as a quarter sheet palm sander, and also a random orbital sander. I'm only testing my students on the combination disc and belt sander, so as a result, this is the machine that I'm going to explain the most and go over all the parts. The rest of them I'm going to demonstrate quickly, but those are not going to be on my test. Now, the machine that we are going to take a look at is this one, and this one happens to be a Powermatic model BD31A. Okay, so this is the machine we're going to look at. First thing I want to do is go over all of the parts, starting from the bottom and working our way up. Now, the first part that I always talk about is the base. This is what the machine sets on. We can see that this base is a large box that it sits on. It also has this right here, which says start and stop. These are our power and non-power buttons, or off buttons, so start and stop. Now, coming up from the power button, we see that we have this knob here. That allows us, there's a knob here and there's one on the back side. That is an angle adjustment knob that allows me to tilt the table in any direction. Typically, we're going to leave this at a 90-degree angle, and so this is the table. Okay, so this is a table, this is an angle adjustment. Aside from the table, or on the side of the table, we can see that we have this circular sandpaper. This is called a sanding disc. Okay, so coming up from the sanding disc, we have another table, and then on the side we also have another angle adjustment, which is right here. It's not actually on the side, it's on the bottom. So this is the black knob. This allows me to adjust the angle of this table as well. And then behind this table, we have this thing, which is seems like a never-ending piece of sandpaper. This is called the sanding belt. Also, two features, well, it's the same feature, but on two different tables. We also have a slot here in this table and a slot here in this table. What that is a miter slot. So this allows me to use a miter gauge, so I can hold a piece of wood at a specific angle in relationship to the sandpaper, so I can sand a specific angle. All right? So, just to quickly recap all the parts before we move on, we have the base, power switch, angle adjustment, table with miter slot, sanding disc, another angle adjustment here, table with miter slot, and a sanding belt. Now that we've got the parts, let's talk about exactly how to use this machine. Before we use any machine in the wood shop, I typically require that there's 5 things that are taken care of, that are safety items. We've got to make sure that we wear our safety glasses. We've got to make sure that if we have long hair, we tie our long hair back so it doesn't get hung up in a machine. We also need to make sure that if we're wearing any dangling jewelry, any necklaces, long earrings, rings, watches, bracelets, anything that might get hung up in a machine, we remove those things. We've also got to make sure that if we're wearing a billowy shirt, something that's way too baggy, something that can get hung up in a machine, we tuck that in. We got to get anything that can get hung up in a machine, we got to get rid of it. The last thing is we can never wear long sleeves or jackets in the shop. I've always got to see from the tip of your finger to your elbow. That way, none of that clothing is going to get hung up in the machine. Now, once I've taken care of that, the next thing is I've got to have a plan. What is exactly am I going to do here at this combination disc and belt sander? Well, typically, whenever we use a sander, what we're using it for is we're using it to smooth an edge or a surface of a piece of wood that we cut. Maybe we didn't cut all the way to the line, which we should never do that anyway if we're free cutting. And maybe we just want to fine-tune something. So this happens to be a piece of material that I've cut in a previous video. And so I'm going to use this. It's kind of like a P shape, not intentionally, but that's what it came out to be. And you can see that we've got these sharp corners here. And I'd like to round these over just to make it look a little bit nicer, even though this is going to end up in the trash. And so what I would do is, I've got my plan, I would come over to the sanding machine. Now typically, most people like to use the belt sander portion of this machine. So I'm going to start here and then I'm going to demonstrate the other part. Keep in mind that anytime you use this machine, you'd be standing directly in front of the table, or you'd be standing directly in front of this table as well. But in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to stand to the side so you can see what's going on. Now, once I'm ready to use this machine, I want to make sure that it's off. I'm going to take my piece of material, I'm going to lay it flat onto the table. Then, before I actually use the machine, I'm going to open up the dust collector door, like so, and then I would turn on the dust collector. The dust collector, this is what it sounds like when it's on. So when I demonstrate this machine, I'm actually going to have it off so that you can hear me better. But let's just imagine that the dust collector is actually on. We can see that because I've got the door open. So what I would do is making sure that I keep my piece of material flat on the table at all times, I'm ready to turn on my machine. Okay? And we can see exactly how this machine works. It is constantly moving, and this is constantly spinning. Okay? Now, what you need to be aware of is as you're using this machine, it's running from one motor. So only one person should be using this machine at one time. I'm going to explain all this stuff because when I have the machine on, you probably can't hear me. The other thing is you want to make sure that anytime you're using this machine, you never have the piece of wood up off the table because this belt is always pushing the piece of wood down to the table. So what it's going to do, it's going to slam it down anyway. You also want to make sure that you're not touching the sandpaper. It's not going to kill you, but if you, for some strange reason, want to push your finger in there, it's going to sand away your finger because that's the job that this thing does. So do not touch the moving sandpaper. Same thing with the disc, and I'll explain some more information about that. So let's go ahead and sand. I want to make sure that when I'm sanding, I'm constantly moving. If I stay in one spot, it's going to give me a flat spot, which I don't want because I want curved corners. So I'm going to turn it on. I'm going to bring my piece of material up to the sanding belt, and I'm going to move it. So you can see I'm going left and right, okay? And what I'm ending up with, instead of a 90-degree corner, I now have a nice rounded corner. Now, of course, if I stayed in one spot for too long, I would end up with a flat corner, which would be kind of like a chamfer. Now, you should have noticed that I did an adjustment over here, and I did that because I could see that this belt was tracking incorrectly. That is something as a student you should never do. Just give me, and I will go ahead and fix that. That way this belt stays right in the center. So there are ways to adjust these machines. I don't want you making any adjustments that I haven't given you permission to do. The other thing is if you ever see a tear or a spot where there's a hole in this sanding belt, turn it off, get my attention, because what happens is if we get a tear and you've got your hands close up, right, and you've got your piece of material, the corner of your material can hang up on that hole, and then this entire thing will rip off. And I've seen it, and it's actually happened to me before, where this breaks off and it hits you right in the hand, and it'll bust your fingernails pretty good. All right, so do not do that. Now, that is the sanding belt. Let's take a look at the sanding disc. When we look at the sanding disc, this sanding disc goes in this direction. So it is moving in a counterclockwise direction. What you need to do is pay attention to where the center of this disc is. From the center to the back, you do not want to sand in that location. Because what's going to happen is it's going to take your piece of material, it's going to lift it up and try to throw it back down here. But if you're not holding on tight, it's going to throw it away from the machine. So you only want to sand from the center to the front end of this disc. Now, if you saw previously, this moves slower, this moves quicker, so this will actually sand away material much faster. Now, I'm going to stand here in sort of the wrong spot, but I'm going to demonstrate how to use this. So, I want to make sure from the center to the front, I'm going to hold my piece of material, and I'm going to rotate to get a nice curved corner. Okay? So, there's my curved corner right there. Right? So, that is this machine. We've got other types of machines like that here in the shop. Each one of them has slightly different features. For example, I've got another machine where we can get real close to this edge, and so we can get interior corners if need be. But typically, when you use this machine, they're all pretty much the same. When we're done, we want to make sure the machine is off. We want to clear off the tables, clean up all the sawdust in the area, and we also want to close the dust collector door, and then we would turn off the dust collector, which, if you remember, I never turned on. That is the combination disc and belt sander. So the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to move on to the oscillating spindle sander. All right, this next machine is the oscillating spindle sander. This happens to be a jet tabletop oscillating spindle sander. This is the one that I'm going to demonstrate. First of all, we've got ourselves a table and a power switch, and we also have our sander here. We can change the size of these. There are a couple of different sizes. We can see that they get smaller, and the one that's currently on there is the largest. Typically, what we would use this machine for is for interior curves. Okay, so it's not really good for anything other than interior curves, or if we want to sand the inside of a curved surface. We can't do that, but I'm going to still demonstrate what this does. We also have a table insert here. I have the largest one on there, and we can place smaller ones depending on the size of the sander that we have, the spindle that we put in there. But what this does is, when we turn it on, it's not connected to any dust collector. All it does is spin and go up and down. So I'm just going to demonstrate how this works. Realistically, you could stand on pretty much any side, left, right, or front, but you would stand directly in the front, and you'd bring it up to your spindle, and you want to hold on to the piece of wood so it doesn't run away from you, okay? And if I leave it in this spot, you can see that I have an interior curve that's been sanded away. When you're done, you turn the machine off, blow all the sawdust onto the floor, sweep up all your mess. That is the oscillating spindle sander. The next thing that we're going to take a look at is the random orbital sander, as well as the quarter sheet palm sander. All right, our last two sanders are the ones here on the tabletop. These are portable sanders. These are things that we plug into an outlet and use directly at the table. This first one that we're going to look at is called a random orbital sander. What it uses is a round sheet of sandpaper, and this thing spins and it shakes at the same time. So, because it's a plug-in machine, what we first want to do is make sure that there are no problems with the cord itself. Once we have that taken care of, we're going to make sure that it is in the off position, which it is, and then I'm going to go ahead and plug it into my drop outlet. If this outlet is not working, we need to make sure that we press the reset button so we see the red LED. Now, the way that this works is you would just simply place this onto your surface and move back and forth until you get a nice smooth surface that you're looking for. So I'll demonstrate that here. I'm going to turn it on. And you can see it spins. You would hold on to it, place it flat, and just move it back and forth. Once you're happy with that, we would go ahead, turn it off, unplug, and wrap it up. I'm just going to set this to the side for right now. One thing that you also need to make sure that you pay attention to, which we can't with this piece of MDF, is anytime you're sanding, you really want to move in the direction of the grain of the wood. So the grain is going to be the line. So for example, in this table, yes, we have individual pieces of wood that have been glued together, but I can see there's natural lines and they're going left to right. So if I were to sand this piece of wood here, this table, I would only sand in the direction of the grain. I would never sand across the grain because A, that's going to scratch up the wood, and it's going to take even longer for us to get it nice and smooth, and you'll end up with scratches all in your finished project. Now, the last sander we're going to take a look at looks real similar, except instead of being a circle, it's a square. This is a quarter sheet palm sander or finish sander. First thing we would do is make sure that everything is good with the cable. We would make sure that it's in the off position, and then we would plug it in. This thing just basically shakes to sand. So when we sand our piece of wood, we want to make sure we move in the same direction as the grain. So I'm going to demonstrate. Turn it on. And that's pretty much it. Keep in mind I was moving in the fake direction of my grain. I was just following the grain pattern of the table. When we're done, we would unplug this, wrap it up, and put it back where it belongs. Now, just like with any machine, we're always making a mess, so as soon as you're done, you put everything on the floor and go ahead and put it in the dust collector. So that's how to use the different sanders that we have here in the shop. Hopefully this explains it to you so you can pass my safety test. Thanks a lot. Catch you later.